So, hello everyone, welcome to this roundtable panel discussion that we've been having on non-duality, and we're joined again by our great guest. I'm the bearded mystic, Rahul Singh, you can call me, and I'm going to go through each of the participants, and I'll speak about the new participant at the end. So we have Artem Boytsov, who's joining us again, Eric Putkonen, who's also joining us again. We've got Guruji Brahman, or Josiah, he's joining us again, welcome, and Lyam, or Yamsox, is joining us today. Frank is our new addition. I just want to say welcome to Frank, and it's really good to have you here and join us.
Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. So we'll start again with a question, and the question, and we continue from last time, obviously. So we'll go through everyone as we did last time. So it was Artem, Eric, then we go to Frank, Guruji, Lyam, and then me, and then it'll be Eric, Frank, Guruji, Lyam, me, and then Artem. So we do that for each question as we go on. So the first question is about the adaptation to modernity. So
may I intersection? I'm really sorry. Just I would I cannot in good conscience continue this interaction without addressing what transpired last time. So so for those of you who do not know, after our interaction, I was sent what I can only describe as an incredible amount of narcissistic abuse by both the host of this podcast, Rahul, and Josiah, which is the person on the right. Rahul apologized to me since then. Josiah never did. So I was wondering, Josiah, if there's anything that you want to tell me or say to me, my friend.
Yeah, so in the email, I had called you a narcissist first, and now you're trying to save face by seeking an apology. The reason Rahul had apologized because he just apologized for his reaction, in a sense that you're trying to use this as a way to assassinate people's character and portray yourself as the victim. We just had a dialogue. You came to me accusing me of not being enlightened, trying to play with my sense of self, trying to convince me that the work I put in and the sages who taught me that their work was useless, I'm not enlightened. So you're trying to mess with my mind and trying to disrespect my work, and then saying I was giving you narcissistic abuse. I was the one who called you a narcissist first, and now you're trying to project it onto me to save some type of face. You were clearly rude in the last discussion and dismissive. So you asked me what I have to say, that's what I have to say, and that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. So whoever accuses first wins. I understand. Okay, thank you. I do not wish to hear from you any longer. I listen to what you have to say. Rahul, I would like to speak for about 3 or 5 minutes, not more, without interruption. Is it possible? And if Eric, Frank, Lyam agrees to that, then I would like to speak, because you see, it's not just a conversation between us. It's a conversation for the audience. My students are watching it. Other people's students are watching it. There's something that needs to be addressed in the interest of everyone. I don't want to argue with Josiah. I want to speak to the audience for about 4 or 5 minutes.
I think 45 minutes will be too much, in my opinion.
4 or 5, not 45.
So yeah, I got you. 4 or 5 minutes will be too much. If you can keep it short. But the thing is, if you say anything, I do, like, for example, you said something about me, I should have the right to reply to that. So if you do want to speak, that's up to you, or we can actually do the roundtable discussion.
I'm okay with Artem making an initial address. It's just, if possible, if we could not open a can of worms where it turns into a flame war going back and forth. You know, I don't, if we can kind of, if we could agree to disagree, there's some different viewpoints. If we can just let that be and get to the questions as soon as possible, that'd be preferred.
I would prefer if we moved on to the round table, but I understand this being Rahul's space. I give him permission to do what he wants with this.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to move on. Like, this is...
Okay, Rahul, that's your decision. If you don't wish to give me the time, then I will just use my time for that.
Yeah, you can use your time for that. That'd be your prerogative. That'd be totally up to you.
Okay.
4 to 5 minutes is too much. We agreed to just 2 minutes,
Okay.
generally in the questions as well, as we said in the email. But
Okay.
yes, but yeah, I am sorry, but I want to keep it to the discussion. What people are here for, they're here for the non-duality, and I want to make sure we address that. So yes, back to the question. So the adaptation to modernity. So is Neo-Advaita or modern non-dual circles more accessible to contemporary seekers, or does it lose the essential elements of the tradition Advaita Vedanta in its adaptation? We'll start with you, Artem, and then we'll go to you, then we'll go across.
Okay, let me know when 2 minutes are up. So, my dear students, I would like to talk to you about the dynamics of spiritual abuse. This is an extremely important topic, very important. So many people think that when they identify with awareness, their ego is gone. This is an extraordinary delusional view. The ego does not even begin to properly dissolve upon identification with awareness. And whatever is left of the ego is always abusive, always. So right now we have the situation where the spiritual abuse is rampant. We have thousands of people, some of them are just kids who don't even have any experience in life, never even lived with a partner, claim enlightenment and teach people love the way that they understand it. And what oftentimes happens is whenever their authority is challenged, that they resort to abuse. And they will also tell you that it's good for you, that the abuse that you receive is good for you, because they're saints now, you see? And saints can do no wrong. Whatever a saint is telling you in his mind is good for you. So we must be very, very careful about it. And it's very difficult to spot if you don't know how to spot, because confidence, kind of this sort of dominance, can be very attractive. It can be extremely attractive, especially if you beat up, especially if you're miserable, especially if you're suffering. Just look at how confidently this person speaks to you. Look at how confidently they interrupt you or tell you to shut your mouth, you see, or telling you that they know the truth and you don't. Therefore, they can speak over you and you can't. And then when you bring it up, when you complain, they will tell you, oh, you're just playing a victim, you see? So what's interesting about the abuse is that abusers always accuse the victim of their abuse. There is not a single abuser in the world that is thinking to themselves, oh, I'm doing this because I'm a piece of shit. I'm doing this because I'm a rotten person. No. In the abuser's mind, it's always your fault. And speaking up to them about their abuse makes you guilty even more. Is my time up?
Yes, I thought it'd be easy to do that.
I've noticed that. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric.
I would, well, I mean, that it's a difficult question to answer, I think, because I don't quite see it as a opposition of modality so much as, non-duality is a living tradition. It is, it has new ideas and it progresses over time. And so, yeah, there was the classical, way from Adi Shankara and things like that. But then you have the more modern Ramana Maharshi and such giving their bend to it. Then it makes it to the West and picks some other little variations to it. And then you get new versions of Neo-Advaita and radical non-duality. You get all these other variations of non-duality. And I would just say that some of the versions just resonate more with some people. Some people just go, yeah, radical non-duality or Neo-Advaita or classical. Any of these could resonate with somebody more than others. And I would say, great, then follow that. But I would never typically say any of them is more right or correct than the other. It comes down to the principles really, and that there is no other. There's no separation. I mean, that's fundamentally what non-duality is about. There's just consciousness, Brahman, self, whatever name you want to pick. And it's realizing, tasting that directly. That's what it comes down to. And all the pointers we use and the different schools that form as people like the same pointers, those are secondary. They're not so important to me.
All right, thank you, Eric. Frank?
I don't think it's more or less accessible. I mean, like your true nature, it kind of transcends time and space. It also includes time and space. It's here right now, right? Like traditions are important, right? It's just a tool at the end of the day, right? Because even spirituality is just a set of tools for you to recognize what's already here, right? And sometimes too much clinging to traditions can hold you back. Sometimes having no traditions, you don't know where to go. You need, somebody who came before you to kind of like pave the road. Yeah. Yeah, I do think if you hang on too much to tradition or spirituality, it can be its own trap. I look at spirituality as a program as well. It's a program that is used to dissolve all the other programs. Say you had a CEO program, you had a bodybuilding program, you have an art program, whatever program that you had. You have a sex program. Spirituality, now I get into spirituality. But if spirituality becomes your new program, then you're not completely free. So spirituality at the end of the day has to self-deconstruct as well, right? And then all the techniques and knowledges in modernity is at your fingertips, right? Like back then, like 200 years ago, we didn't have that, right? We have the internet now. Like I think Osho said, if some of the brightest minds in the West from like his days or even before, like Beethoven, Sartre, Schopenhauer, whatever, if those people had access to non-dual teachings, maybe they do. Some of them probably do, but they didn't have the internet. They couldn't connect the dots as quickly as us. If those bright minds were exposed to spirituality teachings and use those tools, they might be able to transcend their paradigm, they transcend their mind. But a lot of them came pretty close. They were trying to transcend the mind with the mind, right? But ultimately that doesn't work. They're kind of like tap dancing at the edge of the mind. And a lot of them went kind of insane, like Nietzsche. If you look at the video of Nietzsche at the end of his life, there's a video of him online, and Ramana Maharshi is kind of similar. But at the same time, I feel like there can be a lot of traps with the internet with so much information too, right? But then you can utilize the triggers or the obstacles that we find in modern society, like a lot of distractions. You can utilize them to integrate your insights. It's almost like running with parachutes. Right? You're trying to resist. You're trying to lift resistance, kind of like lifting weights, right? Back in Buddha's days, everyone is a farmer, right? Is that it? Okay, so okay, I got one last point to make. Wait, okay, good. Okay, so back in the Buddha's day, everybody was a farmer, so it's probably like easier to not trigger if you have some kind of insight. But in today's world, there's so much triggers, right? There's like social media, internet. So to be able to adapt non-dual awareness in modernity is actually can be beneficial to you. That's what Tantra is about, integration. So it's both sides, two sides of the same coin. It's the double-edged sword, living in modernity and getting into spirituality.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, just when I put my thumbs up,
stop or
finish your point. Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I'll make that clear. Sorry about that, everyone. So yeah, if I put my thumbs up, it's just saying time is up, but you can finish your point. That's absolutely
okay.
Fine.
Got it.
No problem. Yeah. Right, Guruji.
Yeah, so I think I like Frank's point that a lot of philosophers were following spiritual teachings. They would have reached full enlightenment, because a lot of them, they get too fascinated with their minds and or the knowledge, and they don't go beyond. And I think, the sages are just so useful to us, is that when you realize that enlightenment is not beyond experience, and that you can actually, the sages make enlightenment a lot easier. Obviously, we'll have a lot of suffering along the path, but seeking out these traditions, seeking out these sages, and then also realizing that they awaken the inner guru and they are their outer guru, but you also in the end have to follow your own way. And the beauty of all these ways is they all lead to one. So it's beautiful that to give credit to the teachers and use them as a guide and a resource that constantly sharpens your wisdom sword. And also realize that in the end, you have to follow your own path, because nobody's going to lead you to enlightenment but you. But also to be grateful for the outward sources that are so beautiful and so useful to us. So I think, these spiritual teachings, they have so much to give us. And I think the more the world reads spiritual teachings, the better the world will be, because it's just, this knowledge of freedom is so beautiful. Like there's nothing like non-duality, in the sense that it naturally brings everybody together. It's like, there's a story of the Buddha, this man who he wanted to kill the Buddha, And immediately upon meeting the Buddha, he became one of his students. So this is the power of the sages, that they have to transform society, and this is the power of these teachings. And it's beautiful that you see that all the sages, we get to learn from them and also their teachers. Like, for example, even Buddha had a teacher. His name was Alara Kalama, and he was one of Buddha's teachers. Buddha had two teachers that taught him meditation. And it's like seeing these lineages of these sages and seeing these different sages, and even somebody who didn't have a lineage like Osho, it's just, there's so much beauty in these resources, these divine resources that are these sages.
Thank you, Guruji. Lyam?
You know, I didn't know much about Neo-Advaita until relatively recently when I was reading Roar the Ganges, a book by Swami Tadatmananda. And I heard that his guru was very adamant about warning his students about Neo-Advaita. And I had really no idea what this was about until we had a podcast last time, part 1, and we were leading into this idea. So I started reading. In Roar the Ganges, his guru described it as Advaita Vedanta without the Vedanta, which I thought was very descriptive. Advaita being the non-dual tradition, non-duality, where the self and the rest of the universe is one. There is no separate self. But Vedanta, referring to the end of the Vedas, the scriptures from where this tradition arises, is the pramana, the means, the measure, which gets you to realize this. And upon reading the Wikipedia article on Neo-Advaita, I realized that I had been learning from a lot of Neo-Advaitin teachers without realizing it, like Papaji. Pardon me, Papaji. Okay, 1 second.
Don't worry, I won't take the time off you, Lyam.
I have some incense in my room. I think that might be inhaled at time to time. Okay. Yeah, Papaji, who was, I think he self-described himself as a student or disciple of Ramana Maharshi. But Ramana Maharshi, although accredited as founding the Neo-Advaitin movement, you know, he famously said that he had no disciples. There was no lineage that stemmed from him. As such, many criticize people who claim to be disciples of him or accredit the Neo-Advaitin movement to him. But in my own experience, I realized that I was making very similar claims, that you don't need scripture, you don't need a spiritual teacher. And I suppose from a very high sense, this is true. I mean, even in the Ashtavakra Gita, the sage Ashtavakra was asked by King Janaka, you know, the ultimate question: how is knowledge to be achieved, detachment acquired, liberation attained? And this is how the Ashtavakra Gita begins. And Ashtavakra replies, to be free, shun the experiences of the senses like poison. Turn your attention to kindness, forgiveness, sincerity, truth, empathy. You are not earth, water, fire, or air, nor are you even empty space. You are awareness alone, the witness of these. Abide in awareness with no illusion of person, and you will be instantly free and at peace. And later he says that you are the solitary witness of the whole universe. Your only bondage is not seeing this. And this is a very high scripture, a very high guru who is telling you that this can be realized instantly. And from a ultimate perspective, I agree with this, but I know that I thought personally that I got there a lot sooner than I guess I really have to go left. And I would also say things like, you know,
The
the
time's up,
soul is
Lyam.
already enlightened.
But please do finish the last point.
Yeah.
Please do.
But in the meantime, I was still experiencing so much suffering. And so now I do recognize that I'm simply not ready for this revelation, that I have a long way to go, and therefore I do see the importance of Vedanta.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you. So yes, my thoughts on this is really that modern non-duality, on some part of it, the neo-Advaita movement, they don't acknowledge the scriptures or even gurus for that sake, for the sake like Ramana Maharishi or any spiritual practice. And I think that loses a lot of the foundation that is required in order to be ready for the teaching, because it is very direct and one needs to get nurtured in a way. Although, yes, it's made it more accessible. Yes, I do agree that Neo-Advaita has made that possible. But what happens as a result, and I've seen in the past 5-10 years, is that they become gurus. You know, they get big on YouTube, and then lo and behold, you find their channels deleted, and you find out, unfortunately, they've gone through some mental health crisis. So it kind of becomes a bit scary. And what I find they do is just create mini-me's. And so they may parrot what Tony Parsons says or parrot what Jim Newman says and not necessarily know the work that those two people have actually done beforehand. But to go into why I think the traditional way is really good is because the 4 yogas that Swami Vivekananda, really spoke about: devotion, knowledge, selfless action, and meditation. I think they're really important to setting up the mind for the direct pointing, and just going into what in the Upanishads is referred to. We have, and it kind of prepares the mind for this truth that Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahman. So Brahman is a truth, knowledge, and infinity. And then because of that, out of that one teaching comes the 4 Mahavakyas, the 4 great sayings of the Upanishads. And it's said that if your mind is ready, it will understand it instantaneously. Otherwise, you go through Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. So you go through the contemplation, reflection, and just very quickly, the 4 Mahavakyas is Pragyanam Brahma. So consciousness is Brahman. Tattvamasi, you are that. Ayam Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman. And Aham Brahmasmi, the most famous one, which is I am Brahman. So thank you. Now we can open the room for, we got time for some 6 minutes for any rebuttals or any comments anyone wants to make, anything they want to add on. You're free to do so.
Are we supposed to rebut based on the question or?
Based on any of the answers or yeah.
You don't have to stick to the topic of the question, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to issue some comments.
You sure? Please do.
So first of all, Liam, I think that your honesty and vulnerability are beautiful. And regardless of whether you say that you're ready or not ready, this self-honesty about every part of your experience will take you all the way to the final liberation, because the final liberation is as much about being honest with yourself as it is about anything else. And the enlightenment can be described as simply the state of complete honesty. So I think this was very beautiful what you said. So I wanted to say a couple of things about the gurus and the things. So one thing to understand about the ego is that the ego exists in relationship. It exists in hierarchies, always and forever. So it looks above, it looks below. It evaluates who am I better and then who am I worse than. And then what happens when people have a realization is that the awareness is there, sure, but a lot of the ego is always there. And so the ego says, okay, I'm not interested in worldly hierarchies anymore. I have seen through them. I have seen that they bring me suffering. So I'm not as much interested in success, money, other things that make me better than or worse than other people. But now my hierarchy is spiritual hierarchy. So my guru is above me. The ignorant people are below me. And so I'm going to try to climb this hierarchy to reach my guru. So what actually happens is that this view is very painfully destroyed, very painfully. That's why many gurus and sages and YouTube personalities have mental health crisis before authentic aloneness is realized. And in authentic aloneness, there are no gurus, and there is no one above you, there is no one below you. So so that's kind of how the spiritual ego is formed and why it's still abusive, because for as long as you exist in a hierarchy, you are abusive.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Yeah, I think even when after you access the awareness, that's only the beginning, really. I mean, the rest of your solidity, the rest of your quote unquote ego is always gonna try to cling on to something. It's always gonna ratify something. Now, I'm gonna use the word ratification a lot in this talk. What I mean is making something substantial, bringing something into existence, right? So the rest of the ego either is clinging on to a tradition or a guru or awareness, right? That's one of the things that I see a lot in non-dual circles. There's always an inclination to cling onto awareness as the new self, as the big self,
Yes.
right? That's a view in extremity, actually, this eternal witness thing. I went through that stage as well. And then, like a lot of the people that are in non-duality, I realized that I wasn't completely free from suffering. Actually, in a sense, I was suffering even more because I was clinging on to this idea that I am awareness, I'm consciousness,
Yeah.
everything conscious. But that's just a view, actually, right? In a
Yes.
sense, that's just an idea. Sure, there's an experience. Everything, I can say everything is consciousness, like everything is consciousness in a sense. But the clinging on to consciousness can have its own implications. It can have its own danger. That's why a lot of people go crazy after non-duality, because they're not seeing the lack of inherent existence in even consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, and absolutely, I completely agree with you. And then there's also a tendency to sort of rename and discount the remaining suffering. Like, okay, so there's pain but no suffering, or like, okay, I suffer but I just don't identify with it,
Right.
or like some people say, emotions are just energy motions. So it's like there's a tendency after the awareness is found to describe your experience as an experience of no suffering somehow by linguistic tricks, even though obviously you still can get angry, uncomfortable, and things like that. So actually, from that perspective, the role of the authentic guru is not someone to follow or something, but the role of the authentic guru after the realization, after the awareness is found, is to uncover by his questions, dialogues, or his very presence, by uncover the remaining hypocrisy, the remaining suffering in you. And from that perspective, the physical presence is completely different. YouTube video is just a joke. Text is just a joke. I have people that exchanged in very acrimonious, very sort of aggressive text meetings with me, text conversations with me, and then they meet me in person and they cannot hold my gaze. They can look me in the eye for 5 seconds and then it becomes too painful for them. So the physical presence is very important. So if you have a guru whom you can visit physically, please spend as much time as you can with them, because it's very easy to delude yourself into thinking you understand all the ancient texts, that you don't need anyone, that you don't suffer anymore. But for as long as people, any person actually, that's why Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, spend 2 weeks with your parents. So for as long as any people, and especially your guru, can create any sorts of unpleasant reaction in you, which is unpleasant for you to experience with his words, or by just looking at you, conversing with you, the spiritual path continues, and the path of dissolving suffering into the infinite love continues.
I'd have to say, I agree with Artem. I mean, a guru can point out and prod the self-deception, because ultimately you got to be brutally honest with yourself. That's the last refuge of the ego, is to spiritually bypass and excuse and reframe the suffering and everything that's being experienced as, oh, this is okay, but I'm still enlightened.
Because this is okay because I'm awareness.
Yeah.
I don't suffer. Well, awareness never suffers. You see, it's like you just take the identity of awareness and say,
there's a lot of identification there still.
Yeah, but then you see, awareness that can talk either. So I mean, if you say I don't suffer, that's certainly not awareness saying that, because awareness cannot talk and awareness doesn't suffer. So the individual does. So the transformation of the individual, of the human, is what constitutes the bulk of the spiritual path. Finding awareness, discovering awareness is just a milestone in it. It's not even a very significant milestone. I mean, most of the suffering of the ego actually is discovered after finding awareness, not before.
I think if there's still a tendency to separate awareness from the human or separate awareness from phenomena or sensations, there's still duality. And vast spaciousness of awareness is wonderful, it's great, it's blissful. But you can actually, like you said, bypass and suppress some of your emotions. As long as you believe in an idea that awareness doesn't suffer, there's a tendency to say, oh, there's nobody here. That's in view in extremity. So I talk about extremities, and I talk about there's usually two sides of the extremity. One is eternalism. Awareness is eternal. It's, all compassive and everything like that. And the other one is skewed towards nihilism. Oh, there's nobody here. Oh, there's no consciousness. A lot of non-dual people say there's no consciousness. And then other people say there's only consciousness. They're actually just two sides of the extreme. But can you find the middle way that transcends both sides of the extreme, but includes them as well? You're not negating anything.
Yeah, and I think the traditional way doesn't do it that way. To be fair, it's where they acknowledge there's a relative reality, and that's still gonna go on while you have this body and mind, and pain and suffering, happiness and sadness and joy and bliss. All that's gonna be part of that relative reality. But then you have that ultimate reality that's there in the background while you're living in the world. Nobody is going around saying, I certainly don't go around saying I am consciousness everywhere I go. That would be really silly. But I can be in that. I think sometimes language doesn't do a good job, but being in awareness is, it's just there in the background. It's not necessarily interfering with the human emotions or the human suffering. But I also think it's another way of a spiritual bypassing spiritual ego is when you say you don't need a guru, and or once you've done with the guru, just stop visiting them. I actually think it should continue on, because you just never know when the ego can come back up again. I don't personally believe in ego annihilation. I think that the ego still has to happen, still has to exist for us to be in the world, to have this individual identity. But yes, it's another spiritual ego, and people say, and yeah, I know Artem mentioned a really good point about, like, someone can bypass and say, well, I'm not suffering. But a true practitioner of Vedanta will not say, they will say, yes, the body is suffering, the mind may be suffering, but I am not suffering. There's different. I am is truly Brahman, is truly that pure consciousness, that awareness.
But that's the same thing as saying, I am awareness. So when someone points you to your suffering and you say, in response, I am awareness, that's just defense.
But that person's not denying their suffering or their pain.
I think what me and Artem are saying is to realize non-duality as we describe it, suffering itself ends. You don't ever excuse it as something else is suffering.
Yes.
Okay.
So the truly authentic enlightened state is when the body is no longer uncomfortable, when the body is no longer suffering. The body is not restless. The body is completely relaxed.
I would say the mind, maybe, not the body.
The body.
I would disagree with that, because
I know you would, but
listen to me here. But Ramana Maharishi still had throat cancer. I mean, the body still suffers.
I'm not talking about
no. Ramana, I'd like to clarify. Ramana had
but
pain.
His state didn't.
There was pain.
Eric is correct.
But he wasn't miserable about it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the mind. The mind is not miserable.
But let me give you a very clear definition of suffering, actually. Physical pain is physical pain. Yes, you hit your arm. Yes, there's pain. Suffering is something else entirely. Suffering is what comes up as any unpleasant sensation in the body, in the complete objective lack of any threat to the body. So it comes up in meditation. For example, you lie down in meditation, you meditate for 5 hours, absolutely nothing threatens your body. And yet there's fear, there's misery, there's anger, there's something like this. The same applies to your conversation. You go talk to your guru, or you go talk to your mother, or anything like that. You exchange a couple of words. As a result of exchanging this couple of words, now there's suddenly anger, there's suddenly some unpleasant sensation in the body, there's unpleasant energies, absolutely nothing threatens the body. So suffering all comes from the past. It all's coming from the past. Nothing is threatening to you now, but as a result of unprocessed reactions to mistreatment and other life events, suppression of the past, this suffering is present. So the true role of awareness, once it's found, is to illuminate this suffering deeper and deeper, more and more, until all of it is dissolved. The body is relaxed, the individual is happy. And as it continues to happen, the insights come about what the suffering was about, the nature of the reality, the nature of your psyche, and things like that.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, I want to make a correction. I didn't mean suffering. What I meant was, I didn't mean pain. I got mixed up in my words, so I do apologize. But what I meant was, for me, suffering is just perpetual pain. Like when someone gets into the mindset that they're in perpetual pain. That's what I meant by suffering. So yes, Ramana didn't suffer in terms of himself, but that he obviously felt pain from their cancer. So yes.
So in your language, self-realization, the presence of awareness, is the end of suffering as the perpetual pain, but it's not the end of pain for the body. So the authentic deep enlightenment, Buddhahood, basically, is the end of the pain for the body, the pain that is coming from the past. When the body's hurt, it's still hurt, but it's the end of all the discomfort that can be arisen in you in meditation and conversation with your guru. So basically, yes, if you're on the spiritual path, it's a good idea to go and talk to any other enlightened people in person, preferably, and see what a conversation arises in you. Is there any discomfort? Is there any nervousness? Is there any anger? And a good master sees your self-deceit like that, and it just says one phrase, and you're like, oh, and there are things happening in your body.
May I ask,
Yes.
what about in the life of Gautama Buddha, for example, in the last years of his life when he digested an offering of alms food, but he ended up dying due to complications and his body was in severe discomfort?
I can respond to that. There's a difference between pain and suffering. Suffering is pain times resistance. You can still experience physical pain without the mental suffering around it. So the Buddha was experiencing physical pain, but I'm not the Buddha. I don't know how he's experiencing it, but if he really is enlightened, he doesn't have mental sufferings around that pain. He doesn't have resistance around that.
I agree.
But there could be.
Not only did he not have a problem with the pain, but he also did, his impending death didn't bother him either.
Exactly. And I do want to challenge the view that awareness is something in the background. Yeah, because awareness there's no background foreground. As long as there is still a duality between background and foreground, or awareness and the body,
come on, this is. But I think you understand what I mean.
I do think that's really important insight to have, though.
I mean, so you're telling me is awareness. So when you're living in the world, when you're lifting weights, are you?
It's always there.
It is always there. I'm not denying that it's always there, but don't you, when you're acting in the world, you can't be just in that awareness. You're not fully like in a meditative state. There's no
awareness to be in. You are awareness.
Yeah, there is no awareness to be. In a sense, the paradox is, though, I describe this as dissolving the solidity of your body mind from solidity to liquid to smoke, then to air. So you just keep dissolving until you lose the center completely. Then the subject-object duality collapses. But the trick is not the trick, but the paradox is when the center disappears, the bubble also disappears because the circumference cannot exist without a center. So even the bubble of awareness, even awareness is a separate substrate from everything else, from sensation, perception, sight, sound, thoughts, the body. That substrate disappears. Like me and Artem talked about, if you realize something completely, it disappears from your mental landscape. Not that there is no quote-unquote awareness, but that it's just not a thing anymore. You see through the emptiness of awareness, in a sense. Because if you still perceive awareness as having a substance, that means you're still perceiving a part of yourself as having a substance. So you cling on to awareness.
Let me add to that. Maybe I'm sorry. I just want to put it in a way that is maybe more easily understood, that in the language of like clinging and reification.
Grasping, yeah. All suffering comes from grasping, reification, making things solid.
Well, yes, but from the perspective of practice, it's a difficult statement to do something with. I mean, how do you know if you're reifying, not reifying, things like that? So awareness first, yes, it comes up, and it's always in the background. But what its true role is on the spiritual path is bridge the distance between everything and it. Right. Basically, it's on the background because in your experience there is some difference there's some distance between the experience of the human body, pain, and awareness. So with continued practice, awareness bridges the distance with first with pain, because pain is usually the most kind of prominent part of the experience, especially when the human is suffering. So the role of the awareness is to explore the pain, become closer to the pain, become intimate with the pain. So it bridges this distance. And then with that, the awareness bridges the distance to all the human experience, to the 5 bodily senses. And then when this distance is completely bridged, the 5 bodily senses and awareness kind of collapse together, and there's no more distance. It actually, so that's why Osho, after he went into another 3 year of meditation and beyond enlightenment, he said, my spirit and my body are finally one. So it's like, for as long as there is spirit awareness and the body that is observing the awareness, there's still some distance. And in complete enlightenment, it kind of completely closed.
Yeah, that's
that when that distance disappears and the center vanishes and leaving no circumference.
Right.
It does not matter what the body does, whether you're working out, eating, whatever. There's always that centerless, boundless thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when I say grasping, I just mean some kind of a contraction in the body. So all suffering comes from some kind of a grasping, whether you're grasping onto an idea or thoughts or an emotion or space or anything. Yeah. So you have to let go of all grasping. That doesn't mean that when you let go of something, it doesn't exist. You just let go. You're grasping your identification to it. I'm not saying awareness exists or not exists. I'm saying you see through the lack of inherent existence in awareness. When something doesn't have inherent existence, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because when you say something doesn't exist, that's nihilism. That's already one side of the extreme, right? This thing is beyond existence and non-existence. Existence and non-existence is just a duality that doesn't even make sense anymore. Yeah. So exactly. The sensation. Another way I describe it is source becomes appearance. Like there's just this, right? There's nothing to compare this with. So even just saying awareness or not is already a duality.
Yeah, it becomes absurd.
Yeah. That's why people who reach a certain level, kind of quote unquote beyond awareness, rarely talk about awareness, really. Like
yes, and you also have to realize that actually most sages of the past, even though they were self-realized, and we should respect them, and they were some of the truths that they sharing was very profound, but the vast majority of sages were not completely enlightened, actually, and that's why they behaved very erratically. They sometimes showed a lot of anger and things like that. So it's very normal to focus on awareness and awareness only, to kind of, because there's an illusion that that's the only thing that matters. And I've had the same illusion too. Like in the first year or two after self-realization, I thought if only everyone understood that the awareness, everything would be great. But then I was shown that the pain runs much deeper. And so authentic deep masters such as Osho, they talk about awareness, sure, but notice how much they talk about the human, the suffering, the hypocrisy, the lies, the excuses. You see, they want, with their talks, they want to bring up the kind of, do you recognize yourself? And when you recognize yourself, you hurt. And what's hurting in you is the ego. So in their work, they want to bring up the pain of the ego to the surface of consciousness so that it can be explored with awareness. Moreover, I would say that the presence of awareness is not actually very much even indicative of how much suffering you have. Like if you look at the world around you, there are people, 70-year-old old people, very chill, very forgiving, very loving, doesn't know a single word about spirituality, will say, awareness, what awareness? I don't know, I've got no idea. But it's obvious that they have much more love and much more acceptance, and they're much less easily triggered than like 20-year-old, Josiah, I'm sorry, like 20-year-old, 25-year-old, doesn't matter, like young kids that run around screaming, I'm Brahman, I'm awareness, but still very easily pained. You see, so the presence of awareness, the awareness can be present and a huge suffering can be present at the same time, or the person might not even understand what you mean by awareness, but they went through so much shit and explored so much, and they have surrendered to so much of it, then they're naturally more loving, more chill, less triggered, more accepting, more compassionate. So actually exploring the pains and suffering of the ego is the most spiritual work, even the most important. Even before you found awareness, it's the most important. that's what therapists focus on. I mean, you become more emotionally mature, and you become closer and closer to the moment that you will find awareness. And when you find awareness, it continues.
Yeah, I think I understand what the three of you are talking about, but I feel with Vedanta, it's very simple. It's like you just, if once you know that you are awareness, you stick with that, and you come back to that in your day-to-day life until obviously we get to that place where there is only awareness. But even then, awareness becomes this existence. That's the whole point of Satchitananda, is to say that this whole existence is consciousness itself, and it's full of bliss. I think the difference that we have is where I won't say there's anything beyond awareness. I would say there is only consciousness. That is it. And I just put the point blank there. And the reason why Vedanta doesn't concentrate too much on your pain and your suffering, because essentially it shows you through the methods that it's ultimately unreal. It's not going to last. It's changing. One day you're in pain, and the next day you're not. One time you're in suffering. So that they show you through its precise means how it's not real in the ultimate reality sense. Not denying your relative reality, but in the ultimate.
It's unreal in a much more direct way, actually. It's not unreal because it changes. It's literally unreal. But
obviously that's what I mean, because it changes.
No, because
that's the definition. That's the definition.
It's unreal because it's imagined. We make it up and do it to ourselves.
It's kind of like a virtual reality.
You can't say that someone is suffering.
For as long as it's still experienced, it is real for you.
Exactly. That's my point. Until you know who you are, it's going to be...
No. For as long as it's still a part of your experience, it is real for you.
Not necessarily.
So necessarily. So ignoring it, denying it, and saying, "Oh, it's all unreal. I don't need to explore it. I don't need to investigate it." That's spiritual bypassing. That's the definition.
No. I don't think anyone in Vedanta spiritually bypasses. They still deal with their problems.
Vedanta doesn't, but you probably just don't understand Vedanta very well. I'm sorry.
How about this?
I do believe a lot of people in non-duality circle bypass.
Oh yeah, most of them.
I did it myself before, right? So
yes,
I think that ultimately it's not about whether something is real or not, because there's just language that you just create another duality. This is real, it's not real. It's neither real or not real. As long as you're suffering, they're suffering.
But until somebody,
that's my point. Yes,
but it doesn't matter if it's real or not. It feels very real because you're suffering.
You can rename it all you want. You can say it's all temporary. This is all true. It doesn't mean you're not enlightened. It doesn't mean your self-realization didn't happen. It doesn't mean awareness isn't not real. All that it means is that the spiritual work continues, and there is deeper layers of liberation.
Can I put it like this?
Go on, Liam.
When the self is beyond suffering, as it is, there still is a need to serve those who are in suffering, and that includes our own body and mind and those of others.
That's very good. And actually,
basically what I've been saying. I mean,
I would say
you want to make a personal comment about me, Artem?
No, Rahul, I agree with you. I think a lot of people, they make judgments on enlightened people. For example, there was an enlightened sage like Shankar Maharaj, who a lot of people would judge him and say, oh, he wasn't enlightened based on his external behavior, but he would turn people who didn't believe in enlightenment at all into people who were devoted to enlightenment and loved wisdom. So I think a lot of people, they get caught up in the behavior of enlightenment and the age of enlightenment, and they try to suppress people that are younger than them from surpassing them by saying, oh, it's their age that determine their wisdom. But Sage Ashtavakta, who an ancient scripture of his is still remembered today, he was 12 years old when that was written. He was speaking to King Janaka. So, and the beauty of Sage Ashtavakta is he also said, one who looks at the behavior or the words to whether somebody is enlightened will never understand the inner illumination of a self-realized person, because the awareness is beyond the body. We don't separate between good and bad between God. We don't make judgments on God and say, oh, he should behave this way or he should behave that way. Everybody is God or everybody is the goddess. And the beauty of realizing that is that you don't separate and you don't reject your feelings. You accept everything that happens, in the sense that whatever feelings you have, they become naturally one with existence. You don't say, oh, this feeling is enlightened or this state is enlightened. Everything becomes enlightened. Everything becomes beautiful. And I think a lot of people, they shame themselves, and they shame themselves for their feelings, in the sense that they shame themselves for feeling a certain way, and they say, "Oh, I am not enlightened," but you should know that you're always enlightened. For example, Sage Ramana, there's a story of how he got angry at his devotees for not cleaning the toilets. He expressed anger. That's a story of Sage Ramana expressing anger. So, and he's a great sage. And do I say Ramana is not enlightened for expressing anger? No, because I honestly, he might not have even been angry. I just think he may be not speaking in his normal calm tone. But it's like a lot of people, if they look at an enlightened person and they say, it's like they look for any kind of holes to kind of look at the person, or like seeing the person to see if like, oh, this person did this, so they're not enlightened. There's always gonna be critics when it comes to enlightened people. But I think the less we focus on, the behavior of the enlightened person and more on, can they lead me to an inner illumination? Do they lead me to the inner guru? Do they remind me that my freedom is always inherent? Because a lot of people, there's 1,000 different perspectives on people's behaviors. People are going to have so many different opinions of you. And there's going to be people who, like Mirabai said, some praise me, some blame me. I go the other way. So people are always going to think negatively and positively about you. So it's just about having that inner bliss, having that inner peace. Because Krishna, he was a sage and he killed his uncle. And his uncle, some people say, how can an enlightened person kill somebody? He was saving the town from a tyrant. So, and, sometimes an enlightened person does actions somebody else might not deem as enlightened, even though they have inward bliss inside. So don't be too caught up in, thinking, oh, this is an enlightened action, this is an enlightened state. And you're always enlightened. You're always free. The limitless God is always there. You just think you aren't with this mind.
I would like to respond to that, because it's actually, it's not that I disagree with everything you say. Actually, I agree with quite a lot of things you said, which is sort of new for me. so the
we're all God, so it's like even the arguments are an illusion.
You're right in a lot of things. So first of all, it's important for people to understand that you should not shame yourself for your emotions. So every emotion is correct emotion to have. That's very important. I want to make a comment about behavior, though. Frankly, I apologize, but I don't think that you fully understand it yet. So it's very important with regards to behavior. Yes, you're right. The behavior is not indicative. You can be angry. You can be that. Like an enlightened sage or a master can behave in all sorts of very strange ways, and that doesn't mean that he's not enlightened.
Very true. Yeah.
What matters, though, is the inner experience, and it's very difficult to ascertain.
I agree.
Because behavior can come from pain, right? So there's like a painful impulse, like, ooh, I felt insecure, and then you blah, 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 or like, ooh, I felt angry, and then you blah, blah, blah. So there's a tendency for the ego to kind of react to those inner discomforts of the body. And that behavior actually does not bring more truth to the world. It brings more suffering to the world. So when your behavior is always 100% like right action, as they say in Buddhism, then this behavior arises completely without pain and without restlessness, without any uncomfortable sensation in your body at all. And to the Lyam's point, I really loved what you say about service. I think that the greatest service is love, and love is attention. Loving something means giving it attention. So the greatest service to others is giving them unconditional loving presence. And the greatest service to yourself is giving loving attention to every discomfort that arises in your body. That's the same thing. It's the same movement of love. It's the movement of attention. It's the movement of acceptance.
I want to respond to Artem really quickly. So I think we agree, brother. I agree that, it's like there's a difference. It's like when an enlightened sage is expressing anger, sometimes it's like maybe he's been too calm with the student, and it's like that would be the only way to kind of wake the student up, like a sage Nisargadatta Maharaj. But I'm saying I agree with you that as long as you have that inner bliss, no matter what action you express, it has nothing to do with that inner bliss, because the limitless God is beyond the mind and the body. I understand, tension due to your body and mind lead to direct action, or lead to action because the mind and the body are connected. But I'm saying that once you experience, like, for example, Sage Siddhar Meswar told a story about Lord Vishnu, how he hears the venomous poison of the shisha behind him, but he does not find the poison to be harmful to him or annoying. He accepts it as it is. So it's like once you become enlightened, even like the idea, there's like, you don't judge your emotions as like, oh, this is good or bad. Everything becomes bliss. But it's like a paradox in a way where it's like everything just because like everything you feel is bliss. Like everything feels great. Like it's just everything becomes beautiful. Everything becomes divine to you. There's nothing that you feel that is like a rejection or damn, I wish like I felt this more enlightened this way or that way. I agree with you, brother, that there's certain like when you feel angry and it's like, oh my God, I want to kill myself. I feel depressed. That's that and you kill yourself. That's not, and you know, that is pain leading you to an action. But I'm saying it's like bliss beyond is beyond the body. But we agree, brother. Trust me. I think you just probably misunderstood my words a little bit. Trust me though, we agree.
Okay.
Good. What we'll do, we'll move to the next question. That was good discussion. I really liked it. It was really good. So the next part is about sadhana or spiritual practice. Is the emphasis on prolonged and disciplined practice in traditional Advaita essential, or can the more immediate approach of radical non-duality be equally effective? And I maybe just add just a bit. You may have your own method and way of approaching this. You can even talk about that if you like. That's absolutely fine. So we'll start with you, Eric.
Well, I would say regardless of the sadhana or how long that you do it, it's instantaneous in the end. Awakening is always instantaneous. It is more of, and I said this I think in our last session, I find it more about creating a conducive environment for the happening of enlightenment. Kind of like when you're trying to fall asleep at night, you go into a dark and quiet room to get comfortable. Does this cause falling asleep? No. No matter how long you stay in a dark and quiet room, you may not fall asleep if you don't want to, or you have insomnia. But does it make more conducive? Of course it makes it more conducive. You may even fall asleep faster in a dark and quiet room. But so I don't put a causal factor. And I know a lot of classical Advaita almost wants to put a causal thing, like if you put enough time in this, it will cause it. I disagree with that. But I will say sadhana does help. So I'm not quite on the radical non-duality side where I want to toss out all sadhana and I say it's useless to practice. I tend to put it more as sadhana has its place. It can make the environment more conducive. But you never want to think that you're causing enlightenment to happen. It's just do the sadhana for its own sake and let it happen on its own. Rest into it and let it happen. So that's kind of my view. And I think that answers your question.
Thank you. Frank, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think Dasa said enlightenment or awakening is an accident, and practice will make you more accident prone, right? Ultimately, awakening doesn't really happen in time, but then at the same time, it does as well, right? Because the ultimate and the relative are one. But I do agree with Eric is that everything arises through the right conditionality, right? So if you set up the right conditionality, there could be awakening. Just like when all the right conditionality come together, boom, the rainbow appears as this emergent property, right? And then you can apply this insight of codependent origination to even awareness itself, not just awake. Well, yeah, if you talk about awakening being the recognition of awareness initially, that's what's happening. You set up the right condition for the recognition of awareness to happen, but it's not really something that's cause and effect. It's not really something that's linear. But then there can be linearity too, because linearity is also part of the causes and conditions. Yeah. So a sangha or a spiritual practice, you're setting up the right conditions for that to happen. But is one thing leading to the next, sort of this casual level of if I just do this, it's going to lead to awakening? No, it's too simple of a view. It's like everything is just webs on webs of this interest net, like what infinite webs on infinite webs of this interest net. Like every single point is connected to every other point is connected to itself.
You are so buff, it's distracting.
Yeah. I think the seeking, the contraction is necessary. It's a necessary conditionality. Like the Buddha went through like 7-10 years of hard seeking and aesthetic life. But that was what allows him to realize you need to like just surrender and expand. Without the conditionality of contraction, the seeking, there's no conditionality of expansion because the codependent rise as well. So you need both.
Awesome. Guruji?
So you realize that in a sense you have to go through the illusion of practice to find enlightenment. It's like once you go along the journey, and then once you get it, you're like, oh my God, like I was searching for something that I already was. But then it's like, it's funny that you have to go through the journey, and you have to go through the idea that you have to get rid of something that never was. But the beauty of God is that he forgets himself to find himself, and it's actually fun. And it's like you become grateful for your past suffering and, well, the illusion of suffering that you thought you had, because it gives you an opportunity to laugh. It's like all the trials you went through, all the tribulations to finally get to that place. It's like, oh my God, I was a fool. I was already there. So then it's like, that's why freedom is so, and that's why people have such gratefulness to the gurus, because when you practice this sadhana, it's like imagine your whole life you were told you were imprisoned, and then one day somebody shows you a mirror. Like there's a story about how a lion thought he was a mouse, and then somebody showed him he was a lion, and then he realized he was a lion. It's like imagine somebody showed you were a lion, and it's like, and then he reminds you, like, wait a minute, don't pay attention to me pointing that you're a lion. Remember that you're the lion. I'm not, just because I told you the lion doesn't make me the decider whether you're the lion or not. And it's like, wow, like, thank you so much. And that's why people are so grateful to the gurus and their teachers and their spiritual teachers. A lot of people, they judge people who love their teachers, but when they understand, it's like, just to be free of suffering that you never really had is so beautiful. And that's why I think spiritual practice don't ever listen to anybody that tells you something is necessary, but there's so many paradoxes in Enlightenment in a sense it is kind of necessary to learn from these teachers and books and stuff like that, and do this and have direct practice and direct experience beyond experience. Because it's like you can fill your head with so much spiritual knowledge, but it's like you got to put that work in to go beyond the mind and really master Zen.
Thank you, Guruji. Lyam?
I remember Nish the Fish, he was referencing his guru when he said that sadhana begins after enlightenment, or true sadhana, or spirituality really opens up after.
Yep.
And that's not to say that everyone who's practicing sadhana is already enlightened, but it's to say that, don't place these mundane things as less than enlightenment, because even if you're already enlightened, there's so much meaning in the symbolism of sadhana. And I love going through that symbolism. There's more that I could probably take up myself, and I feel like it's just so purposeful in that moment to go through this ritual offering to God, the self, the universe, because, well, what else are you going to do, I guess? Additionally, I remember you mentioned the Mahavakyas, and I think that there's kind of 3 layers to mantra in the Hindu tradition. There's Nama Japa, which is just chanting the holy names. And then if you get initiated by a guru, he gives you a mantra, he or she. And then from that, you do mantra japa. And then at the end, you realize these Mahavakyas, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvam Asi, etc. And I know that previously I had really shortcut that process, and I was chanting the Mahavakyas before ever been giving a mantra, before doing any nama japa. And then I realized that actually I love doing nama japa, even though it's like the entry level and the 3 layers I've described. That feeling of always being a beginner to me, of continually deepening my sadhanas, is just so meaningful. And so I almost put nama japa and that part of sadhana above the Mahavakyas. But that's just my experience.
Thank you, Lyam. That was really, really nice. I remember growing up and always listening to the fact that, realizing consciousness is just the beginning. Then comes the assimilation, and that we've talked a lot about the assimilation afterwards, and what that can entail. And my answer really is, it depends on the seeker. I really believe the seeker has to make that decision what would work for them. Some need to have a lot of time and take it in a slow pace, while some are ready for that wisdom straight away. And we mentioned the Mahavakya. Some people can hear it and they understand instantaneously that what it exactly means. They don't need to do any other work other than just remaining in the state. They've literally, taken the fast pace and got where they need to. But say you need to take time, then I think what Vedanta does, which is really nice, that obviously Shravana is the first step. You listen to the mantra or the Mahavakya, and that begins. Then you have Manana, which is about reflecting upon the mantra or the Mahavakya, and then you need to understand it, address any doubts, observe it from all angles, properly understand it. Don't just accept it. You have to rigorously test it out, doubt it, wash it clean, get it dirty again, wash it clean, get it dirty. You really have to do your work. And then comes Nididhyasana, so contemplate on it, meditate upon it, and allow yourself to become one with the Mahavakya. Allow it to penetrate every part of your being, because that is the ultimate truth. So, in my opinion, doing this along with the 4 yogas that we talked about earlier, that will put someone on a relatively good pace track. And sadhana is not about having a mind free of problems, or a body that is always going to be continuously healthy, or that a life will never have challenges. We can find this sometimes in the devotional path, that people may feel this, but those things will occur. And sadhana is really about making you free from the body, mind, intellect, so you can rest in consciousness alone, which is truly the only reality there is at the ultimate level. And that's what liberation is. And in Vedanta, what I really like, the sadhana is about being liberated while you're alive, not waiting for when you die and think you'll be liberated then. So thank you. I'll go to Artem now.
Okay, so I agree with Lyam when he said that sadhana continues after enlightenment, or as I call the 7th century self-realization. I obviously agree with Eric and Frank with it in everything that he said. So Josiah, I agree with you. I don't judge you for loving your guru. Loving your guru is totally fine. The love for your guru is but a reflection of your love for yourself. So in a very deep realization, this love becomes your entire being, and it encapsulates everyone in the world. So if you feel more love in the presence of your guru, that's wonderful, and it's a beautiful practice. Now, with regards to radical non-duality versus some other more gradual approaches, the problem with radical non-duality actually is that it emphasizes not the sadhana, but the moment of insight. That's actually also the problem with Ramana's self-inquiry technique. Like, who am I? Who is asking this question? Who is receiving this answer? It only works if you're emotionally ready for what's about to follow. That's the problem. That's why such techniques do not have a very high success rate. Because if you are not emotionally ready for what's to follow, then the end result is usually, psychotic episodes and things like that. It's if you just immersed in bliss while continually suffering and still doing some stupid shit out of pain, but you're immersed in bliss all the time, that's actually a very good outcome. For a lot of people, when they receive an insight that their selves don't exist and the egos don't exist, if it's a deep insight and they're not emotionally ready for what follows, it's a long period of very, very difficult experiences. And I spoke to many homeless people on the street. It was absolutely apparent to me that quite a lot of them had a moment of insight. It's just how they speak to me, you see. But they don't have a good guidance to integrate the insight. They don't have a good framework for sadhana. So I think that regardless of whether that you before self-realization or after self-realization, the most fundamental practice is growing to be more and more okay with all parts of your experience. Can be practiced both before and after. It's just that after self-realization, it becomes much easier. But direct pointings without this practice, they for a lot of people, they either don't work or they lead to bad outcomes if this is completely not established, but just pointings. So I'm rather of the opinion that the growing intimacy with your experience is something that is practiced before and after, and the moment of insights happens regardless, somehow on the way. And when it happens, it's always a surprise. It's always a complete surprise. So from this perspective, it's uncaused. It cannot be caused. It's completely folly to try to reach for it, yearn for it, grasp it. It doesn't work. But it marks a point on the path where self-intimacy reached a certain level that awareness became apparent. Because the only thing that hides the awareness, that obscures it from view, is suffering. And suffering is manifested as difficult emotional bodily experience on the level of the body or the heart, and as continued repetitive cyclic thought on the level of the mind. And so in good practice, we learn to get away from the thought and into the sensual experience. I think this works before and after.
I think ultimately we're talking about a distinction between progressive path and direct path, right? So that's one of the biggest paradoxes for most people on the path. Is like, if there's nothing to do, why am I practicing? But actually, that paradox gets resolved. Like progressive path or sadhana path, it's all the same actually. Yeah.
I don't think there is a direct path. I mean, even if you have a direct path and you like realize the awareness and you blissed out for a while, whatever suffering is experienced will still be experienced.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from retrospect. It's like there is a progression, but at the same time there isn't. But like Shi Yang said, like he wants to create a cap and just snap people into non-duality. But even if you can do that, you still need, let's say this two twins, one of them snap into non-duality with a cap like that, and the other twin practiced for like 10 years to get to that point to set up the right conditionality. But that twin who snaps into himself into non-duality probably need just as much time, maybe a little less, because like you said, after recognizing resolution, they probably just
You will need to integrate.
Integrate it. Yeah,
Precisely.
yeah, so it all comes down to the same thing actually. But
Precisely, yes.
yeah. Another way to look at it is the distinction between like waking up and cleaning up, right? Are you supposed to walk through all your stuff first and then recognize awareness, or recognize awareness first and then clean up? It's kind of both, right? If you find the middle way between effort and effortlessness, between doing and non-doing, and then collapsing those duality, then actually it doesn't really make sense to talk about one or the other, right? So you wake up a little bit, you clean up a little bit, you wake up a little bit more, you clean up a little bit more, right? But then, of course, like I said, the insight into self-realization is something that is just an on and off switch, at least the way I explain it.
It either happened or it didn't.
Yeah, it either happened or it didn't. So it's almost like it's another property. It's like you have a bunch of glimpses, bunch of shifts. You open up a little bit, and you go deeper into your subconscious and your conditioning, and you integrate that into the space, and you make the space wider and wider until finally, boom, something like a lightning just strikes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would tend to say it's always sudden, only in that, yeah, there can be a diminishing of the me, there can be insights, but all this revolves around fundamentally a me. There's always the belief in a me. I had this insight, I'm trying to integrate this, there's this stuff happening to me, I made progress. That for me is still all part of the illusion. I mean, for me, it's that ending point where the fundamental illusion of me is seen through and shatters. It just can't be believed anymore. And at that point, suffering, falls away. I mean, prior, as long as a me exists, there is some form of suffering that will just reside. As long as there's a me, there's suffering. But at some point, the illusion of me is seen through, shatters, suffering falls away. And so usually I'll say that point is sudden. And in a way, it's a lot like what a lot of Zen masters would say. They go, it could take 3 minutes, could take 30 years. But they're not talking about putting in time to get it. They're just saying, you may be doing this for a while before that insight happens. Not in a causal way, but, it could happen right away. It could take a while, because we fundamentally cannot cause it, because a me can't fundamentally see through itself or cause itself to transcend itself. That just reinforces the me.
And it's beautiful how this realization is like beyond experience. Like we've had young sages, we've had old sages. Like it's like wisdom, and you learn that the things you've learned have to be unlearned. It's like the things you've collected, it's like they're garbage in a way. Like, but they're also helpful. It's like, but it's like it's beautiful, like the pair, like, and it's beautiful how like much duality is in non-duality. Like you accept a lot of things that you used to not be able to understand. It's like you accept things a lot more because you realize like I just did so much to find something that was nothing and everything at the same time. And it's like I never really had to find it. It was always there. So then you realize like, damn, existence is a beautiful paradox. Like this is like, it's like gorgeous. Like it's like, and then you just fall in love with enlightenment and existence. And it's like, you just, you don't worry about anything. It's just gone because you're gone. It's like, and you realize like, you don't have to find any contentment in the outside because there's just like because enlightenment is kind of like the biggest. It's like you search for contentment through enlightenment. And then even the search doesn't give you it. Then you realize you have to go beyond the search and then it reveals it to you. It's hilarious.
Similarly, it's kind of like either spending 3 minutes or 30 years, but you're trying to find your way home only to realize you've been sitting on your living room couch.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, enlightenment is always finding yourself. It can never be anything else. And I think, and you're right, Josiah, when you say that it's about unlearning. It's about unlearning falsehoods that we believe, because every falsehood in the mind is connected to some suffering, actually. Why? It's very simple, because any falsehood that we believe is self-deceit. If you're lying to yourself about something, then you're suffering. There's no other reason to lie. There's no reason to lie to yourself. So if you're lying to yourself about something, it means you believe some untruth, and it brings you suffering. So all lies in the mind are actually very much connected to the tensions or pains or anything uncomfortable going on in the body. They're connected in a very direct way. And the insight is actually the reversal of this. It's like, for example, you yearn for something or for someone, for example. You yearn for someone and you feel pain and you feel some discomfort in the body and you spend enough time with this. And then suddenly it clicks like, oh, I just did this because I thought that I can be happy without this person, right? Or something like that. So it could be lots and lots as the psyche unravels. There could be lots of this insights of personal nature, and it becomes closer to you than your very skin. I mean, the big insight, the awareness, I'm awareness, the ego doesn't exist, is of course could be said, I guess, the most important one. But don't underestimate the variety of insights of the personal nature of like your habits, your coping mechanisms, your misconceptions about yourself, how you were, how other people are, how people really view you, how you viewed other people. And so when the falsehood it drops off, even a small part of it, what comes as an insight. And as I really like to say oftentimes, is that the interesting thing about authentic insights, they all have this flavor of, I've always known this, always. I was just in denial. Like I've always known, for example, talking about personal insights, like I've always known that this person doesn't actually like me or love me, but I was lying to myself because I was seeking their approval and I really wanted to prove something to them. So an insight like this, there could be a lot of insights like this.
I do think there is a pitfall in trying to clean up before you have some initial glimpses into awareness, because a lot of the times people are just creating an identity of this cleaner that just perpetuates itself. It's almost like putting lipstick on a pig. You're just creating more conditionings, creating more content to deal with the content, to suppress the content, or try to change the content. That could be a pitfall, but at the same time, recognizing, trying to keep glimpsing awareness and not working your stuff can also be a pitfall. But in a sense, you're kind of working on both sides simultaneously at the same time. It's hard to just focus on one or the other because they're actually the same thing, right? The less stuff you have, the more you recognize awareness. The only difference between the Buddha mind and a mind that's unawakened is how much filters there is, how contracted you are, or like you said, how much denial you have. But ultimately, it's the same. It's just a solidified version and a smoky or a version that's completely holographic. But it's actually made of the same thing, right? So it's not like the content or the stuff is distinct from the context or awareness. The content context has always been one. It's just a degree of density. So in a way, you can say everyone is enlightened, but how contracted you are. That prevents you from those lenses of perception, those filters, is what keeping you from seeing the inside. And what is an insight? Insight is just what's always the case. When you recognize the insight into the nature of experience, you realize, all right, it's always been here. It's always been here. Yeah.
So really, the sadhana should be as simple as possible, and as honest as possible. Like for the person, they should be very honest about where they are, and be very honest about how much work they got. And also, I think the path should be as simple as it can be. There's no need to. I think sometimes a lot of people like to complicate it more than it actually is. But I guess that's the nature of the mind. If it's not ready for it, it's going to complicate it. So, yeah, that makes sense.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
Oh, I agree with you actually about the simplicity, and I think that the most simple practice, at least after awareness is found, after self-realization, the most simplest practice that can be done in meditation and in life is what is the most uncomfortable thing that I'm feeling right now in my body? Where is the discontent? Where is there tension or emotion? Something that I don't like. Like, what is something that I don't like that is going on right now? And then give it your direct attention, the direct attention of awareness. And this simple practice will take you all the way. It will do all the cleaning, and it can be practiced in meditation. It can be practiced in conversation with people, like you're talking about it with someone, or they triggered you, or there's some, you just close your eyes. Where is the discomfort? Let me give it love. Let me investigate it. Let me give it attention.
Yeah, that's. I think in Vedanta they call that the rag and dvesh, the compulsions and the what you're attracted to and what you find you compulsive. You don't really want to go near it. Yeah, that makes sense. Right, so we'll move to. I think this will be the only one we'll have time for today, which means there might have to be in part 3. It's now going to be about Maya and ignorance. So how do you, through your teachings or the spiritual practice that you have, how do you conceptualize and address the notions of Maya or samsara and avidya or ignorance or self-ignorance? We'll start with, is it with you, Frank?
You want to start with me? Okay, well, what was the question is how do you, well, ultimately it's about seeing both samsara and nirvana are just your own creations. Like there is no duality between samsara and nirvana, ultimately, right? Between Brahman and the self, like that's another one of the questions, right? Like what is the difference between Brahman and the separate self? There's no distinction. Like the Buddha Maya and everyday Maya eventually merge as one. That's why when I hear people talk about something being beyond experience or beyond the body, that just tells me there's still a duality.
Yeah.
Like there's some kind of a source that you're trying to merge into. Like there's a duality. You're not merging with anything. There's nothing to merge. When the subject object collapses, there's nothing to merge, right? So, sort of the distinction between nirvana and samsara is just again the difference in how much ignorance you have about yourself and how much solidity you have. And I think I mentioned this with Artem. It's like when a duality collapses, both disappears. And the paradox is the dualities kind of give rise to each other, codependent arising, but then at the same time they both disappears. When something codependent arises, both are empty. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. See? Yeah. So the same thing with nirvana and samsara, the difference between Brahman and self, or between ego and God. Ultimately, there's no distinction really. Yeah.
Thank you. Guruji?
Yeah, so I'd remind people that people fall in love with the external. They get infatuated with the external appearance, Maya, the illusion. But I tell people it's okay to fall in love with the goddess, just don't hold on to her. And it's like, let the goddess dance. But a lot of people, they turn into this kind of like dominant husband who doesn't let his wife out, who doesn't let her dance, who's always worried, what's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen if I do that? But I teach people to just accept the goddess as she is. A lot of people, they try to control this existence, and they become averse to existence where they want to renounce, or they hate society, or they hate, the external appearance. But I teach people that it's okay. Enjoy the show. It's beautiful. Everything's beautiful about it. There's nothing separate. And it's like, once you go beyond experience, you realize that you can enjoy experience, because this limitless self is beyond an experience, but it can experience anything. That's the beauty of God. and why I say Shri Gaureshwar Ram, he said, Krishna wants to experience your senses. Why not let him? Why deny him that pleasure? Because Krishna, God, limitless self, the experience of the senses is not separate from God. So I teach people not to hate Maya, but accept Maya as a part of God. Because there's nothing wrong with experiencing as long as you don't fool yourself into thinking that the experience belongs to you. So I teach people that, and just see everything as the goddess. Don't try to fight the illusion. Just, don't create this separation. Don't create this identity that is, oh, I'm spiritually superior to Maya, and it's like one who knows that they've won doesn't need to say that they've won. It just is as it is. So it's like, don't try to fight with Maya with your mind. Just know that everything goes back to source, and but that also means everything is a part of source. So at the same time, you have to realize that everything that you experience, there's no need to run away from anything. Everything is you. So I just don't, even the word Maya, while it's, we use these words to lead back to source, even Maya is God in itself. You realize as the path goes on, it's like, but Maya is a good reference point to get people out of this like illusion of like thinking you're going to find satisfaction in this external world. It's an illusion. It's never going to satisfy you. It never will.
Thank you, Guruji. Lyam?
You're on mute.
Hello?
So, Lyam, next. Yeah, thank you.
I think Maya and Avidya, they get a bad rep. Sanskrit words are notoriously difficult to translate, but it's no coincidence that there's a lot of M's here between Maya and Mata, between material and maternal, or even today matrix and matriarch. They all share a very common etymology, and it's that there is a connection between Mother Nature and this cosmic existence. We sometimes translate Maya to illusion, but it's really a shorthand for the divine illusion. Illusion only because it's full of forms that come and go, but that underlying Brahman is unchanging relative to the Maya. And no one can conquer Maya except for God, because exactly what Guruji said, the Maya is an expression of God. We refer to God as having he, him pronouns only relative to Maya, which is the goddess that has she, her pronouns, like Purusha and Prakriti, like Shakti, Shaktiman. The duality is there between that still essence, that nothingness, Brahman, and the power to create material existence, Maya, the expansion, the movement, the dance. They are both divine, and Maya is just one form of the divine as well. There's famously 3 Shaktis of the Shaktiman, 3 energies of the energetic or potencies of the potential. The Maya is one of them, and that's the material energy. But then there's the Yoga Maya, which is the avidya, the ignorance. Itself is a form of the divine feminine, and the jiva as well, the idea of individuality. And all of them should be respected as the Divine Mother, that there is just a potency there in the material energy, in the ignorance, and in the individual that is no less divine than that ultimate realization of Brahman. I'm reminded of the term Paramahansa, where Hansa refers to a swan. I actually just happen to have one next to me, a paper swan. That's unrelated. But a Paramahansa is a great swan. A swan can survive in the ocean of Maya, but a Paramahansa goes beyond. But beyond that, we have the word Hari, which is a name for both the Shakti and the Shaktiman, God and Goddess is one. And the Sanskrit definition for Hari is the one whom steals the hearts of Paramahansas. That there's these great liberated beings that are in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. They are in non-dual absorption. They have no awareness of the world. And yet Hari, which represents both that divine masculine Brahman and the divine feminine Maya, she steals the heart of the Paramahansas, the liberated beings, and returns them to Maya, not to experience more and more suffering, but so they can recognize the divinity in all of creation, not just the source, the ultimate source, which goes beyond. Avidya is also very self-evident as avidya, the lack of knowledge. We might refer to ignorance as some defect in someone, but it's really just the potential for knowledge to come. Saying that one has avidya means there's more to learn. And to me, that's exciting. I would rather have avidya than vidya because that means there's something to grow into, something to expand into. And so the journey continues.
Thank you. We'll go to me, and then Artem, you can follow once I'm done. So yes, for me, a video is obviously basically my individual ignorance that I have, that I'm this, in Vedanta they constantly call it the BMI, which is body, mind, intellect. And the individual ignorance is this, that I think this body and mind is the only real thing. So a very materialist view. And for a symbol, let's look at this as a wave. And then Maya is basically the power that causes me to believe that this world and this universe is real. So you have the ocean. And then there is this universe, it's another term that's used, which I really like, which is mithya. So what mithya means is that this universe or this whole existence is neither real nor unreal. It's a relative reality. So when you're in pure awareness, this universe is unreal. When you have to deal with the world, then it's real. So you can deal with the problems, any issues that come up. But from the ultimate perspective, the reason why it's unreal is because as the body and mind intellect, and also Maya, it's not ocean and a wave, it's just actually water. That's all it is. The substance is actually just water. The ocean is a name we've imposed, same thing with the wave. And so we impose Maya and avidya. So once those definitions are clear for us and we understand it, we understand that those three things, they ultimately point to what is unreal because they're constantly in flux, they're constantly changing, and we go towards that which does not change. And basically the understanding that we go through with neti is to understand that all those concepts, ideas, notions are all false because they're unreal. So that's the main focus. So the main focus that we have is to focus just on what's real, on pure consciousness, on pure awareness, on Brahman. And the main work is just to bring this into the world. So seeing, as we've heard it earlier, seeing Maya as Brahman, or Brahman is Maya, and Brahman is the universe. Brahman is this individual self. And if that's a bit tough, then people can just see this world and all of its objects that we are aware of as simply just reflections of that Brahman, that ultimate state. So yeah, I now go to Artem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where to begin. The world is real. The universe is real. The enlightenment can be said to be also acceptance of death. So the world is not real from the perspective of death, actually. So if the world was completely unreal, then why would try to affect people? Why would teach? Why would do anything at all? It's an absurd view from my perspective. So when I look at to talk about the concepts of ignorance and Maya, Maya is also real. So I actually agree with Josiah. Oh, sorry, Josiah, I think, right? So I'm sorry. I agree with him when he says that don't hate the Maya. You can't hate the Maya. You can't hate illusion. You can't hate ego. Uh, the the ignorance actually can be described as the ignorance of death and the ignorance of the beauty of life, and it can also be described as this conglomeration of the ideas, of false ideas about yourself that you live your life by. And one of the most important of this idea, which Jose also said, don't focus on the internal, which on the external, I'm sorry, which was a very apt thing to say. So one of the most important part of this idea is I cannot be happy unless, right? So I cannot be happy unless I have this. I cannot be happy unless I have that. And that's part of ignorance. So if you actually think about it, the context of death, this is just extraordinary petty, right? So if you truly accept the final destination, then the thought that you cannot be happy unless you like have some sort of a social success or things like that, it's just absurd. It just becomes absurd. So all of this ideas and beliefs, a lot of them actually, they create some sort of a character that is in this labyrinth of Maya, trying to find himself, trying to find happiness. And this character actually views reality through an extraordinary distorted lens. And it is so distorted that it can actually distort your physical senses. So for people who are still in the grip of illusion or who still live in the Maya, you actually haven't seen how your body looks like yet, really. The real material, the true material reality, actually, that can only be fully recognized in enlightenment. You haven't seen yet, or maybe you have when you were a little kid, but you have forgotten it for such a long time, how flowers really look like. Because this character, this conglomeration of ignorance, actually quite physically distorts the senses. It's not only create this labyrinth when you have to search for happiness and go this way and trying to find yourself, but it quite literally distorts the material reality. How it looks like. Well, you can say it's material, immaterial, it doesn't matter. You can say all that you're looking at as your perception of the brain, but still, I mean, there is reality. We can all agree to that. There's a tree. You won't be able to walk through it. So you can't. You haven't actually, if I've forgotten how beautiful it is and how your senses really feel like, because you're in this labyrinth, trying to find yourself, trying to find happiness. So it's important not to hate it, of course, because this part of you that is suffering mostly, that is in a search, that is in yearning, that has some sort of spiritual impulse. I want to figure myself out. This seems like there's something wrong. Not in a way that there's something wrong with me, but like there's something wrong with this picture. I feel like there is more to life than this, right? It is a very important spiritual impulse. So don't hate this part of yourself. Don't hate your suffering. Don't hate your confusion. Confusion will arise many, many times on the spiritual journey, just like fear, just like all the other forms of suffering. And in the continuation of the spiritual journey, the deeper you go, the less suffering you experience. And of course, the moment that we talked about, the moment of finding yourself, the moment of finding awareness is a very important moment. The actual reality that we all live in until we die will flower in the most beautiful display. It will become much more pleasurable and vivid and beautiful than you could ever imagine. So to me, to say that the world is not real is a rejection of life itself and a clinging to death. But Maya, the illusion, this labyrinth, is actually not real. It is self-created. It is created by the mind, and it is destroyed by the mind. So it's kind of enlightenment feels like a self-destructing process, which is why it can be very disorienting, very confusing, very scary at times, and and kind of all sorts of very strange experiences happen in consciousness as this process happens.
Thank you, Artem. Eric?
Well, I'll try to sum it from my point of view. I mean, if you think about enlightenment as realizing what has always been the case, seeing what is as it really is, we've said these things before. What is? Well, in an Advaita Vedanta way, you just say Brahman is. Brahman alone is, there's nothing else. We hear these kind of phrases as well. And so what is Maya? And I would say fundamentally, Maya is the belief that there is something else. You could say the word, I mean, I usually say the world is real, but another way of just saying it is the world is, it exists. And to think that the world is other than Brahman is the fundamental illusion. This is Brahman. This is it. And so for me, Maya is simply taking something for what it's not, which is, there's Brahman alone, and you think there's something else. This arises due to ignorance. We simply don't know. I mean, we're born not knowing, and through very understandable, incorrect assumptions and conclusions based on our experience and things that were taught by our peers and elders, we come to firmly believe in our otherness. And so, that's all due to just simply not knowing. And so ultimately, Advaita is about dispelling the not knowing, which dispels the illusion of something other than Brahman, and then you just realize Brahman alone exists, and you are that. Now, when I say this at times, I'll have people feel very antagonistic or negative about Advaita and illusion. I mean, not Advaita, but illusion and Maya, and they go, well, why does it even arise? And I'm like, well, I don't ever want to say it's a bad thing, because actually not knowing and illusion are great things. I mean, if there was not knowing, you could not have a surprise party. You fundamentally cannot have a surprise party if you know about it ahead of time. And so the not knowing gives rise to wondrous things. Playing poker would be very dull if everybody knew what everybody's hand was. Not knowing lends itself to the game. We have to not know. And that gives rise to illusion, which is also a great thing. I mean, games fundamentally are illusions. We make up the rules, and we make up whether chutes or ladders have this effect or another. It's just drawing on a cardboard slab. It doesn't really mean anything. Movies, fundamentally illusions. There's actors simulating scenarios to make us believe it's happening. A magician's show, casting these illusions and tricks. These are great things. Illusions is a great thing. Ignorance, I think, is a great thing. I would never say it's a negative, but it is a double-edged sword, and we make ourselves miserable with it. And so, I wouldn't say all illusion and ignorance must be dispelled, but I would say it's to focus on the fundamental illusion, Maya, of something other than Brahman, and dispelling that not knowing that allows that incorrect assumption or illusion to arise.
So I think if the the goal is the elimination of suffering, then anytime you have a contraction in the body, or anytime you feel trigger or whatever, you feel hurt, there is a view that you're attached to. There is a belief that hasn't been looked at. So I keep going back into like the middle way. It's the freedom from all extremity, right? You might think that an extremist is someone who is a suicide bomber or something like that, but actually, before awakening or non-duality, the mind is always an extremist mind. It's always making a view an extreme view, right? Whether that's a view in the separate self or a view, like I said, even in Brahman. So I guess my point is I want to challenge some of those views, like when people use words like eternal substrate or eternal awareness or something that's unchanging. Like something that's unchanging versus something that's changing. They're two extremes, actually.
It's just death.
The death and life are actually one, right?
Well, yeah, but when people talk about something that's unchanging, they talk about death without realizing it.
Right. So are things unchanging or changing? You can't really say one or the other, right? They kind of give Like,
Oh yeah, it's two sides of the same coin. I mean, we're
it's two
living.
sides of the same coin, exactly. So this whole notion of this unchanging, eternal source witness thing, that's the thing I want to challenge. It's like, is there really such a thing? Like, if you look really closely, is there really such a thing, or is that just an experience or a belief that you're attaching to this, right? I look at the stages of realization as, of course, all those stages are completely just, they're just categories of the mind. But I would like to make a little, I like to talk about stages sometimes, even though the first realization I had after self-realization was this is beyond stages. But just to make things a little bit more clear, that there are depth into awakening. There are depth into non-duality even. The first stage can be called unbounded consciousness. That's the I amness, or the power of now, or the pure presence. But basically, like pretty much everything that most spirituality talks about is about this. This is finding awareness, or the sense of eternal awareness. And then there's this non-dual union where the subject-object collapses, you merging with everythingness to nothingness. That's kind of like the Brahman kind of stage. And then the third stage is the anatta realization, or the emptiness realization. And when I say emptiness, again, it's not like a blank or something that don't exist. I'm talking about how everything is dependent or arisen. So when you take the middle way, you destroy all extremities, right? So even Brahman is a process of dependent origination. Even Brahman is dependent arisen. So if you see everything is interconnected, everything you perceive to be the container or the background of experience, say space, time, or consciousness of Brahman, is actually not the container for cosmic conditioning, but actually in themselves, they're also part of the conditioning. So when you destroy all views like that, then that's freedom. Because people are like, okay, the view, is that an intellectual thing? Yeah, in a sense it is, but at the same time, it has physical, emotional implications. Like I said, when you are triggered, there is a view you haven't looked at. So that's one way to do this kind of inquiry. That this is what the Buddha discovered. The Buddha really talks about. Actually, he debated with a lot of Brahmins. He's not saying Brahmins don't exist. He's saying Brahmins lack inherent existence. Even Brahman is quote unquote empty. They lack inherent existence. Even emptiness is empty too, because you can't cling on to even emptiness. So the whole notion of whether something is real or not real, something is eternal or changing, permanence, impermanence, they're all just views and extremities. So I guess what I want to do is invite people to transcend all extremities, but include all the views to find the middle way. And this can kind of explain all the things that we've been talking about: effort versus effortlessness, progressive versus sudden path, right? Waking up versus cleaning up, self versus Brahman. And you see how all these extreme views are just they codependent arise. Right? It's kind of like the observer's effect, right? Things come into existence only through an interaction, and that's love, right? So the consciousness cannot exist without the subject of consciousness, and vice versa. So this whole duality of, oh, is this just a brain, or is there the universal thing over there? They are also probably codependent origin process. And if everything is just codependent origin, that means like neither has an inherent existence. But somehow, when things come together, there is something that there is an experience, sure, yeah. But then at the same time, quote unquote, nothing's happening. So it's not like things don't exist or things exist. Yeah.
One thing I'd like to add to balance it a little bit is kind of like Eric said, that he doesn't think that one absolutely needs to go all the way and clean all the suffering. And I understand the tendency to advocate for that completely. I also advocate for that.
How was that again?
You said that one doesn't have to like fully clean themselves out of all suffering, I think.
No, I didn't quite say that, but okay.
You did not?
No, I would say suffering falls away by and large. But you never know about certain buried conditioning that may arise. So I don't go absolutist, but I would say by and large suffering has to fall away. Yeah.
Most of it. I'll even venture to say 99% of it. Yeah.
Good one. That's the way to go. Yep.
But then, like I said, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. You never know what's going to really trigger you, right? What if your parents just died?
Well, say Ramana Maharshi. I mean, someone widely accepted as enlightened. His mother dies. He shed a tear, and somebody could go, "Oh, he has sorrow. That's suffering. He's not enlightened." No, that was some deep conditioning that came up that he didn't know until the event happened. Even Paramahansa Yogananda said, "Your own death is often an attachment you don't know is there until the brink of death. That's when the full weight of any attachment hits you, is when the event happens." And so I just say suffering by and large falls away, but you don't know what remains. Something small might be there.
Okay, yes, I agree with that. I think psychedelics are also a wonderful test to see what else is there. And because they bring up what's still there perfectly. I would actually differentiate between the emotional reaction they can arise from the events of your life. Like, for example, your mother dies or someone dies and you cry, and the emotional reaction that is coming from the past. Like practices, sadhana practices, like meditation, psychedelic practices, they can only deal with the past, right? You cannot predict future events. So for as long as in meditation there's some experience or suffering, for as long as the psychedelic medicine brings up some experience, the past has not been fully resolved. But even if you did say, even if you did mean that one does not have to fully resolve the past and get into a state where meditation does absolutely nothing, psychedelics do nothing, and then your body is completely relaxed, there's no pain at all. Even if one does not get into that state, even if you did not mean that, I would still mean that. I mean, I would say you don't really have to put a goal for that, because the deeper you go in the spiritual path, the better it gets, regardless. So finding awareness already is such an extraordinary relief for most people, just such an extraordinary relief not to take all this pains and suffering in the body personally, to know that awareness can experience it, to know that you can go through it, to know that you will be okay, even some very, very desperate moments of your life, even extreme grief, even extreme rage, it will pass. You will be okay. You are alive. That's what matters. So even that brings extraordinary relief. And the deeper you go and the more you clean up, as we said today, it's just the life becomes lighter. Life becomes lighter and more beautiful. It flows better. You feel better and better. The body feels better and better, while barring, physical illnesses, but the relaxation of the body continues. The mind becomes quieter and quieter. Sleep becomes more and more relaxing and blissful and profound. So I would say that every step in the right direction is a good step, and this applies even to before self-realization. Just developing emotional maturity, learning to stay with your emotional experience, opening up, becoming more vulnerable, being able to practicing speaking about things that you have never spoken about before, becoming more intimate with your partner, for example, learning to accept people's inner experience and how they are and why they behave the way they do, developing understanding and compassion towards yourself, towards everyone else. Even before this big bang of self-realization, like, oh, I am awareness, that's much more fundamental identity. Even before that, this work will make your life better. It will make you more honest. It will make you more empathetic. It will make you a better partner. It will make you a better human being. So I think every step on the spiritual path is a step into the right direction, regardless of where you are and how long there's still to go. It doesn't matter.
Does anyone want to add any last words before we sign off? We didn't get through all the questions, but it was a good discussion. But yeah, please, Guruji, I see you unmuted. Eric.
Yeah. So I want to. Yeah, Artem, you made a great point earlier about, like, after enlightenment, like, everything starts to become like so vibrant. It's like you went to bed and it was a nightmare, and then you wake up to the kingdom of God, and it's like it's like strange. And I like how you pointed out, like, even to the down to the senses, everything becomes more even. It's like you know when you went outside, it's like, oh my God, nature's so beautiful. Now everything becomes like that. It's like crazy. Like, when you look into the sky, and like, oh my God, the cosmos, like everything becomes like that. Even the simplest, like the ant or like a cat or something.
There's an infinite beauty in everything.
Yeah, I know.
Adi once said, I really love this quote. He said, "There's more truth in a blade of grass than in all the spiritual books." So
that's beautiful.
Everything is so beautiful, so gorgeous. The nature is infinitely complex. The life is infinitely complex. Every living being is a reflection of you. You see, when I look at the squirrel, there's two eyes, one mouth, two heads. I get hungry, it gets hungry. I look at the squirrel and I see myself. Everything is so beautiful. It's
That
Yeah, I know what you mean.
the childlike wonder and awe comes back. It's
Yes.
like it's a squirrel, it's a butterfly, it's a great thing.
There'll be more and more of that, by the way.
You just
There'll be
feel
more and
like,
more of that. As more suffering drops off, there'll be more and more of that. That's the beauty of the path.
you kind of feel like you're perpetually like, you remember those summer times when you're a child? It feels like that every day.
Osho once said, enlightenment is like continually living on LSD. I, I,
Yeah,
I,
I agree with
I
that.
agree, I agree with that description, but if we also like if we take like those people who tried, he's not talking about the kind of the first part of the journey where there's like weirdness and
Yeah, that gets
he's talking about like what happens after the peak when there's kind of the plateau stage where there's just relaxation and you like so the trip is pretty much over and you feel so at home and everything is calm and everything is beautiful and people's faces are beautiful and you're much more relaxed and so that's what he was talking about. And of course there would be, if you continue living in this state and especially if you continue practice, there will be again some moments of suffering. Some suffering will come up in a wave that usually comes up in waves, and then you'll suffer, you'll give it attention, the love will dissolve it, and there will be a slight deepening of this. Oh, it is even more peaceful, it is even more beautiful, and some people describe it as an infinite path.
Yeah, it is because the unfoldment just the reality is unfolding infinitely. Yeah.
Artem, that's so true. Like it's like infinite. It's like it's like you found the one, but not in a lover, but with existence. It's like just infinite, just experiences of love, like until you're gone, and then now. Yeah, it's just
is love.
Yeah,
exactly.
but I like to call it the universe is constantly just fucking itself raw without a condom.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's a pretty raw way to put it, my friend.
And I like the way you describe this. Like it is kind of like a constant psychedelic trip, but without like the trip itself. Because most psychedelic experiences are the byproduct of the solution. So I think one way to describe enlightenment is after you've exhausted and dissolved and transcended all psychedelic experiences and all mystical experiences, all meditative experiences.
Yes.
Because people can't, we haven't talked about it, but people can get really sidetracked with experiences, and they usually cling on to those experiences and create other VR. Yeah, but
it's also important to note that for as long as they come, it's important to have them. Like for as long as spiritual experiences come in meditation or in psychedelics, unitive experiences, have them. As Adyashanti said, also he has quite a lot of beautiful quotes. He said, "Nothing that you still have the taste for can be let go of." So if you still have the taste for spiritual experiences, unitive experiences, they will happen again and again, and they will bring you closer and closer to experiencing this unity permanently and effortlessly throughout all your waking state. And the same actually can be said about suffering. So for as long as there's still anger, or there's still insecurity, or there's still grief, or something that arises, rejoice. It's wonderful. It's an opportunity to go deeper into the grief, go deeper into the anger or fear. Great fear, wonderful. So enjoy it and enjoy it all. And then through this enjoyment, the suffering will slowly dissolve. And the only thing that is really left is peace, love and peace.
Yeah, every time you drink, it's actually a blessing in disguise. Every time something comes out, it's like you can only dissolve it into love. Yeah,
yes,
unconditional love and acceptance. Yeah, that's the entire path, actually.
As you delve into the suffering, though, I think it's also important to, as you embrace it and experience it, to look at it deeply and see the roots of it, because there's usually some belief, some concept. There's something buried in there that makes it arise.
Yeah, exactly.
I would actually disagree with that. I don't think that thoughts or concepts create suffering. My view on that is that thoughts and concepts reflect it. So when you have sufficiently accepted suffering on the level of sensual experience, the belief that was associated with the suffering. You're right that they're intimately interconnected. The beliefs and the false beliefs in suffering, two sides of the same coin. But when the suffering is sufficiently accepted on the sensate level, the belief that was associated with this suffering becomes obvious. It immediately springs into the mind view, and it is immediately seen as absurd. So, and I also wanted to mention something really important, but I forgot. Sorry.
Well, as you think about it, I would say, suffering arises fundamentally due to ignorance. And I think it comes down to the deeper understanding, not mental. The mental is too fickle. It's not about mentally getting it. It's not about thought, but there's a deeper understanding that because there's usually a stored belief, some kind of conditioning, something in there, usually in the body, that if you can see how the suffering arose and what is the basis of it, once it's totally seen, a lot of times it dissolves on its own at that point.
Yeah. Oh, I remembered what I wanted to mention. Yeah, I don't disagree, Eric. So I wanted to comment the Frank's point. So especially for awake people, I mean, mostly for awake people. If you're not yet awake, you have to be careful with that. But for awake people, every trigger is grace. Every single one. So when you deal with people, and the people who can trigger you most are, first of all, enlightened people, those who are deeper than you in the spiritual journey. They can trigger you effortlessly. And interestingly, the loved ones, the people who
in
know
relationships and family, they're the best.
yes.
They're the best
The people
catalysts.
who know you most, that's exactly why they can trigger you most, because they know your weaknesses. They have a certain view of you, which you probably won't like. And in the process of spiritual awakening, you will see how they really view you. And you won't like that at all. and so these people can trigger you very, very efficiently. And every time anyone triggers you and brings up the remaining pain in the body or some repetitive thought in the mind, like obsessive, view it as grace, view it as an opportunity to give awareness to these pains. And this would lead to changing of the stories and uncovering, opening up the false beliefs and dropping them. And the insights, the further and further insights will come.
I love that point where it's like you said, like you see how people really view you, because it's like on this search for truth, it's like you see it's like how do people really see me, instead of like see your ego, like being blinded by your ego. It's like, oh, what does my ego want people to see me as? It's like you see what people, and it's like it's almost hilarious, and it's like it's very isolating, but in a good way, because you realize you only really have yourself in the end, and then you gain true friends because you stop betraying your true self.
And this applies to the desire to want to be seen as enlightened.
Yes, because there's no reason to be seen as enlightened. Who cares?
Yeah. So we'll end it here. Thank you for everyone. I just wanted to give one last word before we go. I know that everyone gave different perspectives, and I really appreciated it. We went through a lot of back and forth to kind of elaborate on our points, and that was really good and straighten things out. I know there was something mentioned about psychedelics, and I don't know the age of every audience that will come across this video, so I just want to say, like, this channel does not endorse that. That's according to the speaker, and we fully respect what the speaker's experiences are. But what I do promote is do Nam Japa. It gives you the same amount of bliss and Ananda as well, and also shows you where your triggers are too. So that's really good. So thank you, Artem, for mentioning those things, and Frank, thank you, Eric, for your wisdom. Thank you, Guruji, for joining us, and thank you, Lyam. I know that you have your daily sanghas, Lyam, so thank you for spending your time here. But yes, thank you. If there's going to be a part 3, we'll be in touch after this. But yeah, thank you to everyone who was in the chat. I really appreciate you being here, and everyone who liked the live. And may we all learn from each other and continue to grow. And thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you.